This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law. And this is podcast 53 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Delighted to be joined by the MVP, the man that runs the camp, you know what, the main face of Lights Out.
Pound for pound, number one.
What, the pound for pound, number one boxing...
Well, Lights Out, obviously.
Or,
you could go with wherever you want.
I think we need to get a proper title regarding what you are to Lights Out. But
brilliant.
Welcome back, mate.
Thank you.
How you been?
Good.
You know what I've got to say?
Go on.
You're a lazy bastard.
Okay.
Because getting you in here is like trying to get Man United to win trophies. But when it comes to doing online
here we
recording,
go.
No problem. I'm doing online recording. But no, I'm only joking. I know you've obviously had a busy few months, but yeah, man, how you been? Everything
all good, mate. All good. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
before we get started, just want to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, like, share, and comment. Turn on the bell for further Lights Out boxing notifications. If you want to check out this podcast on any of the audio platforms, the links are going to be shared below in the description. And if you want to know more about Lights Out, check out our social media platforms. The links are below in the description. And if you want the best free legal advice, check out our sponsors, the best in the business, Spartans Law. The link for the website and their social medias are below in the platform. We've obviously got not that much to talk about current boxing news, but what we like to do with these podcasts is we like to sort of indulge in the past and sort of try and look back at what could have been in the boxing world. Today's podcast is going to be based on the biggest fights in British boxing that never happened. It could be all day talking about them, but what we've decided to do is we've come out with 3 of the biggest fights in British boxing that we thought, as fans, we were never given. Now, I can't unfortunately go back all the way to the 60s and the 70s because that's a long time before my time. So we've kind of sort of like given a bit of a mix. So we've got the late 90s to sort of early 2000s and then the late 2000s and then this kind of era that we're in right now. But when you talk about British boxing, we're blessed where we are right now, aren't we? You know, with just how much talent there is in the British boxing world. And obviously, you, like myself, have been a big boxing fan. And before we sort of go into these fights, do you have to say that this is currently the best era we've got in terms of British boxing?
Absolutely. I think we've got a lot of kind of potential world champions. We've also got boxer that's come onto the scene recently. That's kind of like, it gives boxers another platform to kind of showcase their talents. You've got Queensberry, we've got obviously the Zone with Eddie Earn, and then you've got the US as well. But for the British boxing, Fury and White. I mean, how many tickets did they sell? 90,000. I mean, they 94, and they broke records for the biggest boxing match attendance. I think it was in Europe. So that was a fantastic milestone. So. And, we got to see some fights that, we argued that happened far too late. Amir Khan versus Kell Brook.
But you look back at that month in February, some of the British fights, we got to see Taylor Catterall, Eubank Williams. It's been a fascinating time to be a British boxing fan. Yeah,
absolutely. And, and we had 2 British heavyweights competing for the world title, the WBC. So, it's a great time to be a British boxing fan.
Obviously, the main topic of today is we're going to talk about the biggest fights that didn't happen. And, we could have easily have looked at the biggest fights all around the world of boxing, but there's just too many to choose from. Now, I kind of feel with British boxing that we are at a point now where we're going to start getting these big fights. Look how long we had to wait for Khan versus Brook. That's out of the way. I honestly think Khan and Brook has now paved the way for the rest of these big fights happen because we've seen what the build-up was like. We've seen what the actual fight night was like. It was a phenomenal lead-up to the fight. And I think that's kind of like now going to make these fighters think, right, do you know what? We want a piece of that. And I really do believe that the Khan-Brook fight is going to now open the doors for the
exhibition fights. I can see a lot of exhibition fights. A lot of fighters that...
Yeah, hopefully Khan and Brook is going to open doors now for the Fury versus Joshua fight that we all want to see happen one day. The Anthony Yard versus Joshua Buatsi fight that we hope is going to happen one day. There's so many great domestic fights out there, but we've got to talk about 3 of the fights we picked that we never got to see. 3 of the biggest fights in British boxing that never happened. And the first one for me is a no-brainer. We're going to talk about Joe Calzaghe and Carl Froch. Now, on one side, you've got Joe Calzaghe, For me, one of Britain's best ever. Undefeated, 46-0. And then you've got Nottingham's very own Carl Froch, who, I don't know if you knew this, fought in front of 80,000 at Wembley.
You kid you not?
No, no bullshit. But, yeah, look, I mean, these fighters, you know, really did have great careers. You know, they can look back at their career with no regrets. Now, so, Joe Calzaghe retired in 2008. At the time, he was undefeated. He was the Ring Magazine light heavyweight champion. And Froch, in that same year, had become the world champion for the first time after defeating John Pascal. He became super middleweight champion. But at that point after, that's when Joe Calzaghe left the sport. Now, Joe Calzaghe debuted in 1993. Froch had debuted in 2003. We're going to discuss why we believe the main reasons why these fights never happened. When you talk about Froch versus Calzaghe, I want you to kick it off for us. What do you feel was the number one reason why that fight never happened?
Timing. I think they were both at different times of their careers. One was on the ascendancy, the other one was coming descendancy. They both had achieved, well, I mean, Calzaghe in particular, look what he had achieved at that point. He was undefeated, 43, unblemished record. Fought the likes of Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. You know.
Not a bad way to bow, is it?
I mean, two of the all-time, you know, kind of greats in the US, you know, showstoppers. And he got those on his, you know, he got. It was a good fight as well. So, you know, did what you had to do in the US, made numbers, pay-per-view. So, I mean, why would he take a risk against a younger, up-and-coming? Clearly, his skills were going to get better and better. I think they may recognise, look, Father Time does catch up with every boxer. So Calzaghe was no different. So he probably realised that this is the best time. Got very little to gain. If he does win in that fight against Carl Froch, what does he gain out of that? Because there's levels, you know. I think Calzaghe was levels. He was in that pound-for-pound list. Let's break it down. And this was a up-and-coming who just won the world title at that time.
You know what? I've got to agree with you. No, I have to agree with you on this. I just think one fighter was sort of at the, I wouldn't say the peak of his career, but sort of moving on to that next level, i.e., you know, pound for pound sort of rankings. And then Calzaghe was obviously coming towards the end of his career. Calzaghe, as you mentioned, his last two fights were Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. And in both of those fights, he was down in the first round.
They were good fights as well. I personally had him losing the one against Bernard Hopkins.
Okay.
I thought it was a very close fight, but I think Bernard Hopkins had done more, but he got the win.
Well, that's why we love boxing. It's such a controversial sport. But look...
Yeah. You know, so, I mean, that was kind of showing signs there that maybe...
I don't think it was down to the fact that obviously Calzaghe had been involved in the sport for such a long time. I honestly think at the time Calzaghe looked at Froch, right, and thought, he's just won a world title. I'm at the back end of my career. What do I gain from winning this fight?
Exactly. It doesn't really... I mean, he could have gained a world title, you know, on his last fight, and then
another thing is you've got to remember, right, at that point, Calzaghe was at light heavyweight. Froch was at super middleweight. Now, for those who say to you it's not that much of a difference, just go watch Bivol versus Canelo. You see the difference in there going up from...
What do you reckon the catch weight would have been then? They would have fought out.
Well, again, you know, you've got to remember at the time, when you talk about regardless of a catch weight, Carl Froch, yes, he just won his first world title, but would there have been a lot of money involved in that fight? Potentially not as much as...
British, you know, I mean, someone who's got the right promoter to sell the fight.
And would you really think it'd be fair to ask Calzaghe to go down in weight, especially at his age? He'd been in the sport for nearly 18 years.
Does he want to put his body through that at that time of his... Yeah, I mean, Froch was desperate for it, wasn't he? He was, you know, shouting out for it.
I don't mean desperate. Look,
I mean, he needed that fight to kind of break through. To be honest, even though
we get these problems in boxing where fighters get compared to each other.
Yeah,
Ali will always get compared with Tyson. You know, it just happens. And I think, like, when you mention Joe Calzaghe, you have to mention Carl Froch as well. I've never really kind of got my head around that because, like I said, it was just, for me, it was just a case of two fighters coming up at different times. You had a young and hungry Carl Froch who was looking to conquer the world in exactly what he did. And then you look at Joe Calzaghe, as I said, 1993 debuted in. That's that's a long time ago.
Let's be honest. Look at who Jack Calzaghe was in the ring with, which fighters that he fought at a very early stage in his career. Exactly. So, 43 fights is no joke. And to achieve what he has achieved and walk away with his capacities intact, fair play. That's what you want in boxing: win world titles and then leave the sport with money in your back pocket, and you've got your mental health and your physical mental health, all intact. So,
I personally think that
what would he have gained out of that? I totally agree with you.
Well, I mean, when I said to you, when yesterday we was discussing a few things, and there was a scene from Rocky 5, after Tommy Gunn wins his world title, and then the Duke's trying to pump him up for that fight, and the Duke's like, the old lion versus the young lion. And then, that's where the questions get raised, is Carl Froch the new sort of face of British boxing? Because at that time in 2008, you'd had Amir Khan sort of coming through the ranks. You had Tyson Fury, who was just starting out his career. David Haye was doing what he was doing. But again, we never really had that sort of that face where we looked at thinking, he's going to be the next face of British boxing. Because for many years, it was always Joe Calzaghe. Retired at 46-0, world champion in 2 different weights, beat some of the best fighters possible. That is a hard face to replace in boxing. Because you look after Joe Calzaghe, we was asking the question, who's going to replace the Nigel Bennons and the Chris Eubank Juniors? These are faces that have never been replaced before. So I just think with that fight, right, I don't think financially Carl Froch would have gained a lot out of it. Yes, he had a world title at the time, but Joe Calzaghe had been in this game for so long.
I want to throw something here. So we're making this comparison, that old lion versus young lion. Does the old lion want it at all? It's a big risk at the end of the day. But you've got to give it to Carl Froch when he fought George Groves. Yeah, very similar kind of parallels there.
But when you talk about old lion versus young lion, you look at Chris Eubank Jr., who fought Joe Calzaghe. He was not the same Chris Eubank Jr. Yeah. But because he was Chris Eubank Jr., he still stepped into the ring and took on.
You mean senior?
Sorry, Chris Eubank Senior. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
So it can...
Back to my point about we never got to see the next Nigel Benn and the next Chris Eubank Senior, not the next Chris Eubank Jr. Apologies there. But look...
Yeah, but you see the point I'm making now. If you take that risk...
I just think... Look, Ron, I just think financially, I don't think it made sense to Joe Calzaghe. Yeah. And I'm not going to discredit him for not taking the fight for a financial reason. I just think... it's because he would have not made a lot of money from it. It probably wasn't a big fight in the UK at the time. However, Calzaghe, I think he retired at the right time because, you had a lot of up-and-coming fighters around those weights. You had good fighters coming up at that time. You had like the likes of the Martin Murrays who was coming around. You had George Groves. What's his name? Matthew Macklin, the guy that he fought in that British classic. Jamie Moore. I still think Calzaghe would have beaten all these fighters. But, they say that boxing is more or less like a young man's game now. Which is why you see a lot of fighters sort of getting out of the sport early.
And look, he fulfilled probably a childhood dream in fighting in the US. Roy Jones Jr., one of the greatest ever, let's be honest. Pound for pound list, all time, we could definitely put him in that. Bernard Hopkins, he ain't too shabby either. To have them two as one of your last fights on your record, and look, two world titles he's won. So he's had an incredible career, but we won't know. How would that have finished?
The whole point of this podcast is we have to come to a conclusion as to why these fights never happened. So
I think it's timing. I think that's my opinion.
I would say to shot myself in the foot here. I would say timing and money, but I think financially, I don't think it would have made sense to Joe Calzaghe. I just don't. I think at that time, we never had enough faces in British boxing for that to be, because from the mid 2000s to 2010, for me it was a bad time for British boxing. Yes, we had Amir Khan coming up. Yes, we had Ricky Hatton sort of trying to conquer America. I just think it wasn't that. Boxing in Britain wasn't as thriving as it was 10 years later. So I'm going to go down to the fact that it was based on money. I just don't think it would have generated enough money for Joe Calzaghe. But let's move on because we picked 3 fights. That's one of them out of the way. Second one was a fight that should have happened but didn't happen. David Haye versus Tyson Fury. Now, the first fight was scheduled all the way back in 2013. They had a launch press conference, an unforgettable press conference. That's, for me, the kind of moment where Tyson Fury blew up on the scene. This is where we thought, okay, who is this young, British, cocky, arrogant kid? Because that's what people were thinking. And even he knows that. So, David Haye just lost to Vladimir Klitschko. And he agreed to fight Tyson Fury. He was undefeated. I think he'd beaten Chisora at that point. I think he'd already held the British title. He was chasing the Vladimir Klitschko fight, but this is the fight that fans wanted to see. Again, kind of like old line versus young line. Questions were asked, is Tyson Fury ready for the next level? What's David Haye got to offer after his bad performance against Vladimir Klitschko in what was regarded as the biggest fight of his life? And that press conference, my God, Tyson Fury wound up David Haye. He mentally and psychologically got in the guy's mind and he played mind games with him all the way from the start to the beginning. And it just wasn't that. If you remember, they had a little interview on ringside with Johnny Nelson.
Yes. That was
Adam Smith.
You can see the fireworks kind of setting off then as well.
And it was... Listen, that was Tyson Fury at his best in terms of mind games. Now, the fight didn't happen. 19 days before the fight, David Haye pulled out with an eye injury. So the fight got rescheduled for February 2014. And again, the fight got rescheduled because David Haye got an injury to his shoulder. And he was told by doctors that it was a career-threatening injury and they advised him to retire from the sport. So twice the fight got postponed. And in the build-up to those 2 fights, Tyson Fury on social media, with interviews, was constantly digging at David Haye. The fact that David Haye pulled out the fight the first time just wound Tyson even up more and made him fire more at David Haye. Now, yes, the fights did happen to injury, but the reason why I put this fight in the 3 that we've chosen, I think Tyson Fury beat David Haye before they even ever got to the ring, and I just thought David Haye thought, nah, do you know what? I can't deal with this.
I'm not having this.
What do you think?
I mean, the psychology of how Fury defeats his opponents before stepping to the ring has been a crucial part of his success as well. I'm not going to say it's all down to his antics outside the ring, be it being in a Batman costume, be it kind of singing at the top of his voice. But this was a younger, Tyson Fury. The one that we're used to now is post his mental health, battle with mental health. The wiser. This is unfiltered kind of Tyson Fury, and I didn't know what to make of it. First of all, I thought, who is this guy? Because he was still kind of climbing the ranks, and he put in some good performance. Steve Cunningham, the build up to that, if you remember, him and what's his name, the coach Raheem. Oh God, the one of the Nazim Richardson. Yeah. So, and if you think back to David Haye's previous loss, the fight he was coming back from was a loss to Klitschko, and and David Haye played the role of the villain. He didn't care.
But he did defeat Chisora after that. But yeah, no.
But the point I'm making that he played that role as a villain.
So you're saying it's basically we've seen the different side to David Haye.
Yeah, and I think in this, because David Haye was trying to put him on the back foot. Didn't work with Klitschko. Clearly, he was outclassed on the night, and his toe, let him down. So this was like the role reversal here. You've got the younger man here. He's got nothing to lose. Just like, I want to make a name for myself. I just want to fight you. I want to get in that ring. And I totally, I do tend to agree with you that the mind games might have thought, I don't want this. This is, I'm going to have to fight 2 fights here. One, trying to beat you and trying to get the one over you in press conferences and that. And secondly, the fight itself. Look at we'll talk about the physical aspects. It's completely different. But I would have been fascinated to see how that fight would have planned out. How would he have dealt with it? We've seen David Haye with bigger fighters, Valiev and Klitschko, and he's come out with the same game plan. So, it was a massive shame for British boxing, that we didn't get to see that. Could have, if Tyson Fury would have won that, Just imagine what would have happened to his profile at that point in his life. You know? Then he would have got the Klitschko fight, which we know he obviously went on to. But what would have happened to David Haye if he had won that fight?
Exactly.
You know,
put him back in world title contention for sure.
Yeah, because he did he ever get a world title shot after that?
No,
that Klitschko lost. So
the aim for him was always to come back and win a world title at heavyweight after Klitschko. He spoke about it a lot, and he goes after the. He goes in the build up to that fight. He goes, the aim is to reclaim the world heavyweight title.
I mean, look. To be fair with David Haye, his career was savaged by injuries. You know, towards the latter part. You know, we saw against that Bellew fight as well. So you know, I'm not going to say that the mind games completely did it, but his body was giving up on him. You know, he wasn't that same fighter that he was at cruiserweight when he was moving to heavyweight. You know, obviously he's a smaller guy that's stepping into against bigger men. So I think injuries just didn't help his career.
I think we have to.
So I'm not going to just say he got scared mentally or
This is where we're going to have to disagree, mate. We have to look at it this way, right? So the second fight that got postponed, right? David Haye was told that we don't think you'll fight again. Your career's more or less over. Okay, and 2 years later he's fighting in exhibitions against Mark Demori and I don't know, bloody Joe Blogs from the Job Centre or whatever. But one was Mark Demori, I can't remember. And then he's fighting Tony Bellew, who, to be honest with you, bloody was probably 10 times more worse than Tyson Fury was in the build up to their fight. You know, Tony Bellew got in his face, made him uncomfortable. You know, you've seen David Haye punch, stroke, slap him in one of the face-offs. I just think at the time, right?
Do you think he lost that fight against Bellew because of
down to the
Bellew? Just question.
I just think he was finished
physically, or do you think he was beaten before he stepped into the ring?
Yes, I said this when we've done the build up to those two fights. We done podcast after podcast
and revenge, and you got it right. You got it right both times.
Look at the injuries this guy's had. That shoulder, he is never going to be the same fighter again.
He wasn't, but so much you can patch it up, can't you?
I just think at the time, right, Tyson Fury was a massive risk for David Haye because he just lost the biggest fight of his career against Vladimir Klitschko, and he blamed it on a broken toe that nobody knew about, right? And then he signs to fight Tyson Fury, who has got nothing to lose, who is being tipped as the next big thing in this division, who was currently, I believe at that time, was probably number 1 or number 2 in Britain. David Haye went into that press conference, didn't know what to expect, and he got annihilated. He lost the press conference, which is what's going to happen to any fighter when they fight Tyson Fury. Okay, it's just a given in boxing, yeah? Okay? And then I just think at the time, David Haye probably thought, 1, psychologically he's beaten me. 2, I've got an injury. 3, if I do take this fight and I lose to this guy, that is me done with boxing. So he took the stint from boxing. He come back and, he had a few comeback fights. And then he got the 2 fights out of Tony Bellew. Then a few months ago, he's fighting his friend Joe Forney, I believe his name. So I think he's played it smart there because I just think Tyson Fury would have ended the guy. Completely ended him. And he would have never come back.
Would have ended his career prematurely. You know what I mean? Because, in terms of the value that he's got now, look, I'm just saying, if he had lost that fight against Fury... Hold on, let me hear me out. If he had lost to Tyson Fury at that point in his career, his career to date wouldn't be as valuable as it is now.
Yeah.
He maintained some sort of dignity, like not losing against this, this young and up and coming, didn't give a shit, said whatever
arrogant, which is what he was,
and
still
yeah, and he came, But I concede the point that you're making that he maybe thought, if I lose this, where do I go from there?
And you got to remember, right?
Because boxing forgets, man. The boxing has short-term memory.
100%. You got to remember, right? Like, I've just put that point to you that, like, it was too much of a risk for him, okay? And yeah, he lost the first fight against Tony Bellew, but many people were saying this because he picked up an injury.
Yep.
And I was like, look, you watch that fight again before the injury. He doesn't look like the old David Haye. It looks like, Father Time has caught up with him. He was just so off it in both fights. And I just thought at the time I don't think he ever got over the Klitschko defeat. That was a massive thing for him because he constantly claimed he was gonna, when he was saying I want both the Klitschko's heads, he had a T-shirt of him holding, on that face-off he did with Max Kellerman and Vladimir Klitschko, and he was constantly talking about how he's going to deliver Chelsea Football Club Stadium for that fight because he's a Chelsea fan. He ended up going to fight in Klitschko's backyard. he made a lot of promises which he didn't live up to. And then one thing he did, right, and he took a lot of stick for this, obviously, was he pulled out the fight twice. Now, yes, okay, maybe he did get an injury. We all know that he's always had bad shoulder problems, okay? But the bottom line is, I just think Tyson Fury psychologically got in this guy's head so badly that Haye was a defeated man before the fight was supposed to happen. And the one thing that annoys me about this is because I always wanted to see David Haye. All right, yes, he beat Chisora. We got to see that grudge match. But I always wanted to see Tyson Fury fight David Haye because I do believe at that time David Haye still had something to offer. And I do believe it would have probably been Tyson Fury's toughest test of his career. And it would have been good to see. But it didn't. Again, now we come to a conclusion on it. I'm strictly going by the fact that fight never happened because David Haye did not want any of Tyson Fury because of what Tyson Fury done him in the build-up to that fight, which included the press conference and, of course, their sort of inside interview with Sky Sports, Adam Smith and Johnny Nelson.
I'm going to factor that in as well, because I think from hearing your argument that you make a very compelling point that the psychological warfare prior to the actual fight itself would have taken its toll on him. But I think David Haye's body was just giving up on him. I think that's something that we cannot deny. He's had countless number of shoulder surgeries and whatnot. And secondly, if he did lose that fight, where does he go from there? You know what I mean? And his value doesn't remain what it is what it's maintained to today.
Years later, those comeback fights have no value. Those fights with Tony Bellew have no value. I just think he played it smart. He took a break from the sport.
And he's not done bad for himself. He's got into a few exhibition fights, made a couple.
Then you need to remember after that he was promoting his own fights on Channel 5.
Yeah,
the likes of Michael Venom Page, and he was managing Linus Adofia. Then obviously the two fights with Bellew, and then he's managed Chisora, and he's still about in boxing.
He's still relevant in boxing.
And John Fury wants to fight him next. And he's David Haye always bets against Tyson Fury whenever he does a prediction for BT Sports.
That's always been that needle, hasn't it? Yeah. I think John Fury said he's not going to be anywhere near the ring. I think he made that kind of...
Which is why the BT Sport set up for the Fury White fight was far, far away from the ring. It was kind of like, I don't know, near the goalkeeper's place. Yeah. But again, I'm pointing it down to the fact that I just think he didn't want any part of Tyson Fury.
I think you make a valid point there. I can see what you're saying, and I could see that being linked to if he had lost that, what then? At that point in his career, because he'd lost the biggest fight in his world opportunity to against Klitschko, who was. I remember Haye was making out, I'm here to save boxing. You guys are boring, and all the insults in the world. And it wasn't meant to be. His toe didn't, allow him to become victorious that night.
But then we did get to see a good build-up with the Chisora fight and the whole, he glassed me and I'm going to physically...
Yeah, and I enjoyed the Bellew fights as well. Maybe it was a few years...
I did not enjoy those fights.
I think I love the build-up. Come on.
The build-up I love.
Great, and then revenge will repeat.
Regardless of what your opinion of David Haye is, we have to remember he is a former two-weight world champion. Yeah. He was a great fighter. But it wasn't nice seeing him in... Especially that second fight with Tony Bellew, you could just tell that this guy was...
His kind of body was kind of like giving up on him.
Yeah, exactly. All right, okay. Well, that's fight number 2 out of the way. Fight number 3 is where we're going to get a lot of controversial, I think. A lot of controversy. And obviously that is Ricky Hatton and Junior Witter. Now, we kind of nearly got the same sort of experience with Khan versus Brook, but as we said at the start of the podcast, we've seen Khan versus Brook. They gave... the British fans what they wanted. Okay, could they have done it 5-6 years ago? Yeah, of course they could have, but would we have rather seen it than not seen it at all? So we've seen it in the end. It's happened. But this fight didn't happen. And these two were kind of similar to Khan and Brook at the time, if you think about it. Both two of Britain's biggest faces in the sports. Both had been world champions, especially...
I can see the parallels, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? These were very similar to the Khan and Brook saga, and obviously they both came up at the same time. They both have been mentioned during amateurs. It was tipped to be...
Who was the promoter for Witter?
So, at the time, Frank Warren was looking after Ricky Hatton, and I think Junior Witter's was kind of like... It was more like how Dillian White's is with Matchroom. It's sort of like a I just think it was kind of like a fight-by-fight deal with Frank Warren, but he obviously lost his big fight to Zepeda and Junior Witter, and then he had 5 fights after that, and he won everyone by KO. And after the 5th victory in a row after the Zepeda defeat, they called Ricky Hatton over in an interview, and I believe it was Adam Smith who was doing the interview, and Adam asked him, listen, what's the reason why this fight's not happened at the moment, and is it going to happen? And Ricky Hatton goes, he doesn't sell enough tickets. He bores me watching him as a fighter. He's been boring, but his performances...
Sounds like Khan on Mikhail Brook. This I see it.
His performances lately have not really impressed me, but the last 1 or 2, okay, there you can see there is something there. And it just dragged after that. And then obviously Ricky Hatton went on and did what he did in 2005 and was at the pinnacle of his career after beating Costa Tszyu in that hell of a hellacious fight in Manchester. But the fight never happened. I remember during lockdown I interviewed Junior Witter, and I spoke to him about the Ricky Hatton fight, and he goes, the reason why Ricky Hatton never fought me is because he thought of every excuse not to fight me. I just think when we look at this one, the main focus point here is I don't think Ricky Hatton saw Junior Witter as a bigger draw than Junior thought he was.
I'd agree.
Get your thoughts on it.
Totally agree with that. I think promotion, in terms of promotion, Hatton's promotion was excellent.
He had a solid fan base.
Yeah, solid fan base, very passionate fan base. Just remember when he used to come out, Blue Moon. Those amazing nights in Manchester.
The build-up to Mayweather.
Pacquiao. He fought the best. And Junior Witter, it just didn't really take off for him. He had that fight, that fight you said about with Zepeda, and I think that was it. I think I have to totally agree with Hatton that what do I get out of kind of fighting you? Because Ricky Hatton was on a massive trajectory. And Junior Witter's trajectory was a lot slower and a lot not as gradual, not as kind of high as Ricky Hatton's. I think so. They just didn't. He didn't think he was worth it. It's like an unnecessary risk to take. Yeah, it would have been a good fight, but it's not going to sell tickets. It's not going to gain as much attention as a Pacquiao fight would, or the big names that he was fighting. So it's a shame.
More risk, less reward, right?
That's it. I mean, I think that was my thinking. What did he bring to the table? Has he got a title? Has he got?
Yeah, I think with this fight, you have to base it on the fact that Hatton was the A side. When you look at Khan and Brook, Khan was always the celebrity sort of face, conquered America, been on live TV, reality TV, sort of had this like public image look about him with his wife Farial. I don't think Junior Witter sort of had that. I don't think he had that public appeal. And this is not me disrespecting Junior Witter. I thought he was a very, very good fighter. I've interviewed him enough times, and I don't want to sound like I'm being disrespectful.
He didn't get the same level of recognition.
He didn't get that recognition. And I just think,
totally agree.
This is what winds me up about our sport, right? Okay, promoters, listen, they are entitled to make money in this sport, okay? I don't disagree with that, but when you're promoting a fight, me personally, right, if I'm a promoter, I'm looking at this fight and I'm thinking to myself, these guys are fighting, they're making me money, but they're risking more than I'm risking. These guys could be potentially going in there and they could be seriously harming each other in this fight. So what can I do to sort of make sure that, I've given these guys something to be thankful for? I.e., I can promote these guys better. And we all saw the promotion for Fury versus White was shit. It was shit, Ron. Especially for Dillian White. Now, his own reasons as to not getting involved. I thought that maybe Frank Warren could have done more. I honestly think what
could you do with one arm tied behind your back? That's what it was. That's what he was dealing with.
Yeah, but this is where
you need two to tango, man. He can't have a press conference as good as Tyson Fury is. Sorry. Yeah, but what more could have Frank Warren done? I mean,
But this is where we have where these this is why I love what Eddie Hearn does in the game, man. I mean, Eddie Hearn, right? Okay, he'll promote a fucking tangerine if he has to. The guy is so good at what he does. I go to press conferences regularly, yeah, And he will constantly talk about the guy that's 2-0 or 3-0, or the guy that's just lost 2 fights in a row. And he'll speak to every media outlet because why? Because he wants to promote his shows. He's that passionate about it. He's willing to stay behind the extra 2-3 years. And I just think that, don't get me wrong, massive respect for Frank Warren. Love what he's done in the sport, but I just don't think he hasn't got that sort of that push that these younger promoters have got right now.
I think what I was going to say, we're talking about Tyson and that Gillian White. What was that undercard all about? I mean, that was a very poor undercard considering we had a headliner of such.
It was bad. It was bad.
But then they were saying if Matchroom had done the same,
absolutely,
the box had done the same.
They wouldn't have. Look,
But
back to this Witter and Hatton. Yeah, I just think that maybe Frank Warren could have sort of took the light off of Ricky Hatton a bit and said, no, do you know what? This guy is a former world champion. Yeah. He put up a gutsy performance against Zab Judo, who was considered a very good fighter at the time. He'd won British titles. He'd won European titles. He'd won 5 fights in a row after Zab Judo. And as I said, at that period...
Could have sold that and promoted that and said,
exactly,
listen...
Manchester or, anywhere.
I think Hatton was frying bigger fish. That was the reality.
Yeah, but Ron,
that was it, really. It would have benefited him. Because, talking about Frank Warren here, but it just sadly didn't happen that way for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't see as much attraction, or it's going to be a money puller. Like you said, Junior Witter didn't get that same level of recognition. He had travelled. I mean, solid fighter.
And unfortunately,
European, British titles.
Tony Bellew done an interview the other day with IFL TV. Shout out to IFL TV, and they asked him a question about his thoughts on Fury retiring, and he goes, "No chance Fury retires because the fight with Anthony Joshua is too good to turn down. Even if whatever happens with Usyk, he goes, the fight with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua has to happen." Then he goes, we don't want another Junior Witter versus Ricky Hatton situation. So you look at that fight between Hatton and that potential fight we could have got. It was regarded as a big fight at the time. They were both world champions. They both conquered Britain. They both won European. They were both at the top of their game. But I just think with Ricky Hatton's world title win, that sort of pushed him up to another level in his career. Calzaghe and Castillo and the fights with Mayweather and Pacquiao, because he had that sort of appeal about him. I just don't think, unfortunately, Junior Witter had that appeal about him to the British public and potentially the fans in America. And I just think that's why the fight never happened. I don't think Ricky Hatton ducked him. I just thought Ricky Hatton at the time thought, no, it doesn't generate enough money for me, and this guy's not on my level. But had the fight with Amir Khan not happened, Amir Khan in Kell Brook, and the reason Amir Khan was given is he's not on my level. What does he bring to the table? What names does he bring onto the table? People would have been saying that Amir Khan ducked Kell Brook. So are we right to turn around and say Ricky Hatton ducked Junior Witter? What's your overall take on it? What conclusion do you give as to why we never saw Hatton versus Witter?
I don't think he ducked him. I just think he didn't see that value in that fight. You talk about revenue, how much would they have made? Do people really want it? I stand by that. I think Ricky Hatton was frying bigger fish, like the names that you mentioned. The great resume he had on his record, and he's financially done really well for himself with those big fights towards the end of his career in the US. He was loved. He was a British icon, wasn't he? Boxing icon, loved by Manchester. And Junior Witter, for whatever reason, wasn't promoted in the same way, didn't get that same kind of exposure. He was kind of fighting in, kind of these kind of they don't get that same recognition, like these European titles, these British titles. They don't get the same recognition as a fight at the Madison Square Garden or a Las Vegas kind of fight that Hatton was kind of selling out wherever he was fighting. And the following that he had, do you remember against Mayweather?
Oof. How could you forget about the build-up to the Floyd Mayweather Ricky Hatton fight? And this is it again. People want to like to follow the guy who's they feel as if can be the face of the sport. Who they have that appeal, who gives them that sort of appeal. And I just think, unfortunately, Junior Witter never got that. And it's kind of, for me, that's kind of strange because obviously when you look at his background, he came from the iconic Ingalls gym. And you look at most of the fighters that have come from that gym.
they've all...
Nazim Hamid, Johnny Nelson, Errol Graham, Kell Brook, all these great... And they've had great following. They've had a great fan base. Nazim Hamid had an unbelievable fan base.
Okay, let me ask you a question. So, he had the right team behind him at the England gym you speak very highly of. What if he was a fighter in today's generation right now? Do you reckon it would still play out the same way for him?
No, I think he'd be a lot bigger.
A lot bigger.
Because
so if he was with, let's say, a boxer or...
I think he'd be a lot bigger than he is right now, because you've got to remember, we're at a time right now where British boxing is thriving at the moment.
Yeah.
Especially with all the good talent we've got on our hands.
And the good stables that they've got. I mean, boxers are just... It's like it came out yesterday and who they've signed up. And they're looking to build up their roster as well.
Really on a new journey, but I think...
So, I think...
Wrong era at the wrong time. That's what I think it probably was, because he never got that love that Ricky Hatton got. And there's no harm in that. We as fans have a right to choose who we like to support and who we don't like to support. If everybody supported the same guy, it wouldn't be fun.
No.
So I just think if he was around today, Junior Witter, I reckon yes, he would, because
you would have got more exposure. You would have got the bigger fights.
Social media is a big thing.
Absolutely. So. I just think that there was not enough room at the table. I think that's what they probably said.
It really surprises me Frank Warren never made that fight. Do you know what? Another point I want to make, right? You look at every promoter that tried making Khan versus Brook. They never did it. Who did it?
Ben Shalom.
Ben Shalom. And he's been in the game 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Incredible. And you look at some of the cards he's already delivered in his breakout year. Eubank Williams grudge match. Catterall versus Taylor, which has caused so much controversy after the fight.
But look who looks good in that. It's him.
And then he's going to get Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. We're hopefully going to get Fury versus Michael Hunter.
I like that.
We've got the Azim brothers coming up. Ben Whittaker signed with them. The Olympic silver medalist. Natasha Jonas is a world champion now. They've got Fraser Clark. They've got Caroline Dubois. Back to the point we were talking about Ben Shalom is, I think the promoter plays a huge part in this as well. Because whatever anyone's opinion on Ben Shalom is, he delivered Khan versus Brook, the fight that we were calling for years. So maybe Frank Warren could have done a lot better in this.
I think you were initially sceptical about someone like Ben Shalom coming into.
I was worried for him.
Because he was just like, boxing's not in a good place. But I think it's made these other two promoters kind of jump a little bit. Can I
just say, I've got Sky Sports and Box as the number one boxing platform in the UK right now.
Wow,
100%.
Cool. Boxers number one.
For me, Box and Sky Sports are number one right now. Go look at the shows they've been putting on. Go look at how good the two boxer tournaments have been.
Number two? Who would you pick? Queensbury or
Matchroom in the Zone? Number 3 is Queensbury.
Yeah.
You have to look back at the
1 and 2. I would debate. But Boxer's done fantastic.
Conclusion: why did it not happen? Hatton versus Witter. I'm going by the fact that Ricky Hatton never saw Junior Witter as a big enough name.
I'm sticking to that too as well. But I think he was just frying bigger fish, making more money, fighting fights that would get him more recognition. As good as Junior Witter was, he's a hard-working fighter, but. Just even despite that, it's like, okay, he didn't get that fight, but what other fights, can he get really recognised for? Not many, boxing fans, your average boxing fan wouldn't be able to tell you. You'd really have to research his record. Yes, he had that fight with Zab Judah. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. But if you look at his rest of his career, he had 12 defeats at the end of it all. So it kind of...
I think he carried on more than he should have. I think he let boxing give up on him.
But let's keep one thing in our mind. Someone's making a comeback right now. Ricky Hatton is making a comeback against Antonio Barrera.
Absolutely no chance.
And Junior Witter, I'm sure he's involved in
Junior
boxing.
Witter runs a gym in Sheffield now.
Look, he's...
No.
But look, I wouldn't rule it out.
Because playing devil's advocate.
No, I'm not. I wouldn't rule it out. If they said, right, let's have it, they get that long-awaited fight. Mark my word, mate. That's if that comes through, you're gonna pay out. You're gonna be like thinking, shit, I should have placed a bet on that. I could see that happening.
Okay, fair enough. Well, if you've got hope that fight still could happen, then you're a very, very hopeful person. But I just think Ricky Hatton just fancies one last little dance around the lights with Marco Antonio Barrera. But no, I don't think we'll see Hatton versus Junior Witter. Too late. Okay, right. So we've summed up the 3 British fights, the biggest fights in British boxing that never happened. Rank them in order for me. You got Froch, Calzaghe, Fury, Haye, Hatton, Witter, 1 to 3.
1 being the one that we're most disappointed didn't happen. The most disappointed with.
What do you think was the biggest out of the 3?
Oh, the biggest one fight not to happen.
What was the biggest fight in British boxing that never happened?
David Haye, Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury.
Really?
Yeah. I just think that could have changed their paths so completely.
Imagine Fury lost.
Just imagine Fury lost. What would have happened to him as a result of his career?
Imagine Haye lost and he retired after that. What would that have meant for Tony Bellew? So many ifs and buts.
You know what I mean? It changes the landscape of the boxing. Yeah, it just completely... Okay. I think... Yeah, because Tyson Fury, I was just thinking, he's just loud. He's just trying to be a wannabe kind of Muhammad Ali kind of character. But little did we know, this guy is going to be such a charismatic figure in boxing. But he's given us some unforgettable kind of moments in boxing. I just hope that would have been a great fight. I reckon I would have enjoyed that.
Number 2.
I'll let you pick this one. What do you think is number 2?
Hatton, Witter.
Oh no! Do you agree with my number 1, or do you think?
No, you were always going to choose number 1.
Would you agree with that? Did you? Sorry.
I would have personally put Hatton, Witter at number 1.
Okay.
I would have put Haye, Fury at number 2. No, sorry, I would have put Calzaghe, Froch at number 2 and Haye, Fury at number 3. Because we didn't get to see the fight, but we got to see like a press conference. We had sort of like a taster of what. But I know it's not the same.
It's just like getting teased by a girl. You know what I mean? It's just like
never happened to me, by the way. But it's just like we're never going to see Carl Froch and Joe Calzaghe sat on a table talking about a potential fight. We're never going to get to see.
See, that's what made that even more fascinating because it was on the cusp of happening.
It's kind of sort of raised Fury's profile a little bit. Yeah. It did. The whole mind games in the press conference.
Absolutely, it kind of brought him a lot of attention. Like, who's this guy? Look at him, and he was continuing his kind of like trajectory up towards being kind of this high like heavyweight contender.
So number 1, you've gone with Fury, Haye.
Definitely.
Number 2, I'm going to go with Hatton versus Witter.
Hatton versus Witter.
Can we agree on number 3 being number 3? Froch, Calzaghe.
Yes, I think out of the 3, that just looked least likely to happen.
Yes.
Because there was a possibility of his Haye and Fury. Obviously, they had a press conference. They had 2 dates that were cancelled. With Hatton and Witter, they were active at the same kind of time. They were champions. They were, British kind of domestic rivals, but it just didn't happen. Third one, which we've already said, that Father Time kind of was not in line for them to meet in the ring. But yeah, I think I'd agree with that. That'd be 1, 2, 3.
It's a shame for British boxing though, because they would have been great fights to watch.
Would have been, yeah. But I think he didn't want to risk it. Calzaghe, he was just like, look, I've got the best 2 names on my record. Mm-hmm. What's Froch can add to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, less. Obviously, you'd have to look at it. More reward, more risk, less reward is what I'd have to label it. Okay, so that's 1 to 3. Guys, we'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section. Mm-hmm. Are there fights out there that you would have liked us to have mentioned? Give us some of your thoughts as well as British fights that have never happened that you thought should have happened at the time.
Can I name one that it's not British, but it should have happened? Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis.
Yeah, but it's not British though.
I know, but that's the fight.
That was our first ever podcast, by the way, guys. If you want to watch our first ever Lights Out podcast, jump on that. Another fight I would have liked to have seen: Billy Joe Saunders versus George Groves.
Yeah, you were saying that.
Yeah, because I remember when I started off Lights Out, my first ever interview was with Frank Warren. At that time, Billy Joe Saunders was meant to fight. Martin Murray, and then George Groves was in the tournament that the Sowlands do, and he sort of mentioned about it, and I was kind of warming to it. And he goes, "It is a fight that we would like to have, but it never happened." But
one for you, one British, one American. Amir Khan versus Mayweather.
Why would you want to watch that for? Mayweather would have knocked him out. Schooled him.
Because there was a lot of noise coming from Amir Khan. I'm too fast. I'm too... He doesn't...
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Amir Khan versus...
the same thing.
Amir Khan versus Pacquiao.
Yeah. I would have liked to see Amir Khan versus Pacquiao.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Mayweather would have completely annihilated him. Anyway, we'll talk a bit about the action on the weekend at the O2 Arena. We had another, again, same topic, British domestic dust-up, because Josh Buatsi beat Craig Richards via a points decision. Thoughts on the fight?
Yeah, I think he did what he had to do. It wasn't all that eventful. I think it was a very tight fight. Some really close rounds. I think Buatsi just done enough, and it was a credible win on his record. Craig Richards has been with some really good fighters, Bivol being one, and he did his record no harm, because he gave a really good account of himself. But I agreed with the decision. I thought Buatsi put in the better work, landed the cleaner punches, had the better accuracy. And I think this is going to set him up really well for the future. He wants those world title fights. I think this is like a nice stepping stone. A good...
Yeah, I mean, first things first, a lot of people are saying it was a great fight. I would say it was a decent fight.
I wouldn't say it was like
Eddie Hearn said a potential rematch, and I wouldn't say it was an amazing fight. I thought it was a decent fight. I thought it was a good fight. I thought, it was a decent fight, hats off to Josh Buatsi. It was a big step up for him because Craig Richards, a former British champion, gave an incredible performance and account of himself against Bivol. So it was always a big ask for Josh Buatsi. Having said that, you said before the fight, what does he need to do? And then you also said that you'd like to see Buatsi make a statement tonight. And I do think there's a few points during that fight he could have potentially got a knockout. But Craig Richards, is a stubborn fighter. He's got good chin. And he's a good fighter as well.
So it's not like, I didn't knock him out. Fine, he got the points win. Maybe those rounds will do him good in the future when he's fighting someone who doesn't get knocked over. But that's not Buatsi's style. He's not a...
This division right now, there's a lot of... what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of people got their eye on it now because of what happened with Bivol and Canelo. But we don't know what's going to happen whether Canelo fight Bivol again, or does he fight
at what weight as well?
At what weight? Yeah. But what do you think's next for Joshua Buatsi? Because when we talk about Joshua Buatsi, one name comes up quite a few times is Anthony Yard. Is that the next fight, or do you think Josh Buatsi should perhaps take a slight risk and look at the Bivols and perhaps the winner of the Joe Smith Jr. and Artabiev fight? What is the next move? Because, and don't forget, there's Callum Smith out there as well. There's Lyndon Arthur out there. There's still good names British domestic wise, but is now the right time that he makes that step up to the world level?
I'd like to see that fight with Yard, I think. And apparently, I don't know if you heard the interview. I don't know if you heard that interview with what's his name? Eddie Hearn, when he said, I offered him £1 million to take that fight. And instead he goes, I'm going to fight the winner of, was it Beterbiev and Benavidez?
Joe Smith Jr.
Joe Smith Jr. So,
and a fight.
And apparently...
the fight was even, it has been announced now.
It's been announced now. So he goes, what are you going to do in the interim? They're going to fight in July. Has the fight been agreed yet?
I believe it is July. August, yeah.
So the earliest that he can fight him is in December. Yeah? Because obviously time off after you've had a fight. So what's he going to do I think that would have been a great opportunity for him to take that fight with Buatsi. Comes off on the winner, whoever wins that, they fight the winner. That would have set him up really well, I think.
We spoke about David Haye and Tyson Fury. High risk, less reward.
For who?
It's for Anthony Yard for that fight for Josh Buatsi because he's lost twice. And if he loses to Buatsi, he does not get close to a world title.
Because he's brought himself back in recognition with that win against Lyndon Arthur. I totally agree. And he won that in great fashion
I don't think that's a bad move for Anthony Yard. If he is this close, if his next fight is for a world title, there's no harm in, sort of holding tight and waiting for that fight to happen. However, I do think Frank Warren needs to keep him busy. I do think he needs to fight before that because his last fight was what? It was November, that fight now. We're in May. It's what?
It's too much of a gap. He's,
Maybe 6 months out of the ring.
That's a problem with Anthony Yard recently. He's not been fighting as regularly. It's a bit like, but that's the opposite with Buatsi. He's fighting. He's getting them out regularly, isn't he, Eddie Hearn? So that could be ring rust. I don't know what he's hoping to do. Is he going to not fight for a year and then fight? That's not ideal kind of fight for your biggest fight of your career. Mm-hmm. So I think if he's got his head right, he'll pick up a fight now just to tick him over.
I don't think the fight with Yard will happen because
he was supposed to be on the undercard of Fury and White, wasn't he?
Well, there was rumours, and then obviously, from what I'm hearing, most of the money for that fight went to Tyson Fury and Dillian White, and they never had a lot of funds to put on a better undercard. But according to Frank Warren, he thought the undercard seemed pretty good. A lot of us didn't think it was a pay-per-view worthy undercard. I mean, if you compare that undercard to Joshua versus Usyk, I believe on the Joshua Usyk undercard, you had Callum Smith debuting at light heavyweight, and you had Lawrence Okoli defend his world title, and I think Campbell Hatton fought on that, and that's an undercard. I mean, you look back at who was it? Fury. You look at Joshua versus White, Chris Eubank Jr., Tony Bellew were on the undercard. That's an undercard. But having said that, back to the point about Buatsi, I don't think the fight with Lyndon Arthur will happen anytime soon because both with different rival promotions, Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn. I would like to see the fight with Callum Smith because we need to see Callum Smith tested at this weight. I think it's a massive risk if he was to step up against one of the world champions without being tested at the weight. And I would like to see Josh Buatsi
and Callum Smith.
And I just think that would look so good on his CV if he beats Callum Smith, former world champion at super middleweight, Muhammad Ali Trophy winner, and he's the more experienced fighter.
And Callum Smith has only lost once in his record
against probably one of the best fighters in the world.
P for P, yeah.
Exactly.
So you want to put him in with Buatsi?
I'm telling you now, Josh Buatsi fights Callum Smith.
You think he beats?
If he beats Callum Smith, I can't say
it's a
he beats
big ask. Yeah.
There's no harm in losing that fight, but if he beats Callum Smith, former world champion, former Muhammad Ali Trophy winner, this guy's...
I just think it's a bit step too far for him. I think
he
needs another fight in him to... Wow, yeah.
This is where you're all over the gaff, Ron. If you're going to put him in with a Better Be Ever or Joe Smith Jr. or Bivol, why don't you put him in with Callum Smith?
Because Callum Smith's on that kind of level.
He's on the same promotion.
Yeah,
that
it's a big ask. It's a big fight. I would favour Callum Smith winning that fight.
Yeah. There's no harm in that.
That's it. I think it's just a dangerous fight for him. I think that's it.
If you think the fight with Callum Smith is dangerous, imagine how more dangerous the fights are with the three world champions in that division is. We saw what Bivol done to Canelo. Better Biev is a machine. Okay, he's got punching power like on another level. Okay, Joe Smith Jr. is a good fighter. Yeah, I just think right now that the right fight for me, I'd make Buatsi versus Callum Smith. I'd love to see that fight.
It's a good fight. I'd definitely watch it. Is it a paper?
No, it's not pay-per-view.
A pay-per-view fight?
Absolutely not. Not pay-per-view.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
But it is an O2 Arena, maybe Manchester Arena fight with a half decent undercard. Before we bring the podcast to an end, let's just talk about a couple of rumours. Chisora versus Kownacki. Do you like it?
Well, we've always said in the show, I mean, where is Chisora going? Is he just going to give these fighters
money? That's what he does. He glassed me.
I mean, Kownacki is coming off a defeat, doesn't he, himself? Yeah. So this is another way for him to get a good name on his record as well. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't stay up and watch it late. Where is it happening in the UK?
Happening in the UK.
But it's in July, right? I think I saw there was something on Instagram where he was signing. Okay, that must have been it. Okay, good fight. Keeps Chisora still relevant in boxing.
Martin Bakole's win over Tony Yoka. Did you see it coming?
Yeah, no, I didn't see that coming.
Unbelievable.
And he dropped him as well. Was it twice or once or twice in that? Yeah, he looked like Bambi, and didn't see that coming. It was supposed to be big hope from France, a European fire coming through, but
kind of like PSG, then, isn't it?
Yeah,
Ben Davison come out and said that Josh Taylor's number one preferred fight is the rematch with Jack Catterall because of what went on in that fight.
Is he not fighting Zepeda?
Well, the WBA,
That was
I believe, ordered that as a mandatory defense, but because of what the outcome of the first fight, that has to be the next fight.
Really?
Taylor,
is he taking that fight then?
Well, Ben Davis has done an interview and he said that the next fight that Josh wants is the rematch with Jack Catterall. That's the next fight, right? Surely it has to be. Because
Most definitely. I mean, that is the biggest robbery we've seen in British boxing. Big, far right. I mean, I felt so sorry. I mean, I felt like crying for Jack Catterall. But if that fight does happen, brilliant. I hope Jack Catterall gets the win this time. Which he surely, definitely deserved from the previous time.
Last one before we bring it to an end. Has Tyson Fury retired, or do you think he'll fight again?
He's going to fight again. That's it. I mean, I agree with Bellew. He's like, is he really going to leave the boxing at the top of his game? And there's so many unanswered questions. Yeah, people say he's too big, he's too skillful, he's too powerful for Usyk. That Joshua and Usyk fight is going to happen.
It will.
July, we're thinking.
July, but apparently it's going to be pushed back a few weeks.
Whenever it does happen, you're telling me that Tyson Fury is going to walk away where he's got a chance to take one more fight for all the marbles.
And a lot of money as well.
And a lot of money. Saudis will pay ridiculous kind of amounts for that.
I agree.
And you think he's going to deny his fans, his following, one more night. So let's say the best case scenario is they fight in December.
It could happen. I honestly think
that would be the highest grossing, most viewed pay-per-view event.
Fury Joshua has to make it to be the biggest fight of all time.
Hands down.
I think he's done with boxing. I don't think he's fighting again. Absolutely not, because one, we've had no announcement on Joshua versus.
But WBC have said they're giving him the time to make that decision. Yeah. They're not going to rush him.
And obviously, I don't think he fights again. And speaking of the WBC, they said if Tyson Fury does vacate, they would like to make a tournament for a new WBC champion to be crowned, and they said
like a Muhammad Ali kind of tournament.
Yeah, they said that they would have Deontay Wilder in there, they'd have Dillian White in there, there'd be a few more names in there. Andy Ruiz was a name mentioned. I believe Joseph Parker, Joe Joyce were. I would really be up for that, but at the same time,
I mean, this tournament would take 2 years to have an overall champion, right?
2 years, you can get great fights though.
That's it. I'm in favour of that. None of this bullshit. Oh no, we can't make the match. No, you're obligated to fight. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how they decide on who gets.
Do you know what the icing on the cake in all this is, right? Is I guarantee you what I could see happening, right? Is it wouldn't surprise me if Tyson Fury did retire and just come back and won all the belts again. Because I honestly believe he doesn't see any heavyweight there right now that he sees as a threat or a challenge. So what does he do to sort of challenge himself? All right, do you know what? I'll retire in 2 years' time. I'll come back.
I'll give you guys a chance to catch up with me.
Yeah, it's like you said in that. It's like you said in that comeback press conference that we went to, and one of the guys goes, "Have you got a message for any of the heavyweights?" He goes, "Good luck, guys. You're all on notice." That's the kind of guy he is. I wouldn't surprise me. He took a year or two out the ring, and he just like one day saw it.
He's still training though. He's still in the gym. Still keeping looking over.
Which is good.
But I think that's his way of life now, rather than drinking his sorrows away. Yeah. And what I mean, he's made some changes.
If he does retire, hats off to the guy.
Surely can't.
Ron, come on, man.
What is he? 33.
Ron, look, you again did it. This is where you're all over the gaff. I know I've said it before, but what's there to prove?
Undisputed.
Forget the undisputed. He's won all the belts, Ron.
No, but having them all in one go, removing that question, who's, all right, we know he's the number one. I mean, even Eddie Anderson's admitted that. Usyk's number 2. Mm-hmm. But why not, of your era, fight these other guys? That's what the difference is of Ali, the Larry Holmes,
I want to see the fight.
The Mike Tyson, the Lennox Lewis's. What do? They fought everyone in that.
I would love to see him fight Joshua. I'd love to see him fight Usyk. But if he doesn't, if that guy has retired, that would be the missing piece from his legacy. If that guy's retired, okay, and he has walked away from the sport, then you know what? Hats off to him, because at the end of the day, Nobody was giving this guy a prayer, a hope when he was trying to come back into boxing. Nobody ever, apart from me,
I totally get
apart
that.
from me,
Yeah.
nobody ever believed that he'd become a world champion. Apart from me, nobody ever believed that he will knock out Deontay Wilder, and nobody ever believed that he was capable of becoming a bigger name than Anthony Joshua, not just in Britain but also in America. And let's remember one thing: the guy's become an ambassador for mental health. He's gone and done it in WWE. He's gone and done it in America. He is a bigger name in America right now than any other heavyweight, probably any other boxer from any weight. Okay, if he retires, right, if he is done from the sport, hats off to him. Phenomenal career for me. The best heavyweight since Muhammad Ali. Tremendous fighter. Go and enjoy your life because
all right. You make some very valid points.
Is
right.
this
Let me give you a football analogy kind of comparison. Right. Liverpool's had an amazing season, right?
A phenomenal season.
So, right. Just imagine it gets to 37 games. How would you feel if Klopp said to his boys, "You know what? Don't worry about it." But
that's not going to happen.
No. I'm just saying, like,
Ron,
because
that's a poor comparison.
Win the Premiership title, right? Just hear me out here, yeah. That's where Tyson Fury's at. He's going to play that one more game.
Ron, you can't. Jurgen Klopp, right? If he ever said something like that, I'd personally go to Liverpool to sack him myself. Yeah. That's not how it works in football. All right, okay.
You see what the comparison I'm trying to make, that he can have...
Ron, would I love to see him fight Anthony Joshua? Yes.
Thank you. That's it. That's all we need to know. But
of course, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't, he doesn't.
But they make that comparison. Like, look, Lennox Lewis, who did he fight? He fought everyone around to cement that legacy that he was the greatest of his generation.
Okay.
I do believe that Tyson Fury is the greatest of it. But if he takes that one more fight against a Usyk, against a Joshua...
Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing though, Rondo. Yeah, this is what fans don't realise, yeah?
Okay.
Let's say Usyk beats Joshua.
Yep.
Okay? And then Fury fights Usyk and beats him, becomes undisputed champion, and then retires. People are going to turn around and be like, well, hold on a second, he never fought Joshua. It's just like, you're just going backwards and forwards. I'll use a football comparison. It's kind of like England winning the World Cup and beating, I don't know, Colombia, Sweden, France, and Germany on their route to the World Cup. But then a fan could be like, well, you never beat Brazil, or you never beat Holland, or you never...
You only can beat
what's in front of you. And he has beaten... Yeah. He's beaten the most dangerous puncher in the history of the heavyweight division, and he's beaten probably one of the greatest heavyweights in our era that nobody could do. What was it? 11 years undefeated. And not just beat him, he schooled him. He's done it in America. He's done it on, WWE reality TV, ambassador for mental health. He's sold out Wembley to another level. Don't look at what he's done inside the ring. Look at outside the ring what he's achieved.
Get that. Look, I'm just talking. I'm just only commenting in a boxing sense. Like, you've done 95% of the season, play that last game, and then you'll soar so high. No one's going to even be able to touch you.
I think this is where I need to give you a P45 and say thank you for the memories, but it's time to go. All right, okay. Look, listen, I'd love to debate about it all day long, but we're going to have to bring the podcast to an end. Thank you very much, mate. Cool. Don't take offence to the "you're all over the gaff" comments. You do, guys. Thank you very much for listening and watching our podcast this week. And before we do bring it to an end, please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit that bell for further future Lights Out Boxing content. Check us out on all the social media platforms if you want some legal advice. We're sponsored by the best legal law firm company in the world, in Spartans Law. Their details are below in the description. Give him a follow on social media as well so he can stop harassing me when I put a post up on my Instagram and taking a mick out of my Liverpool photographs and everything. Am I joking? But guys, thank you very much. And again, if you want to listen to this podcast on any of the audio platforms, links are below in the description. Thank you for listening to podcast 53 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.